There was a live stream event with Japanese officials. That's right, you heard me right. Japanese officials with Christopher Mellon, Ross Coulthart, and Representative Eric Burleson talking about UFO disclosure. And it was something that not a lot of people saw, but the things that were said in it, you're going to want to hear about. So,
Lue Elizondo, I think that he was not attending because I think he needs to take a break. He feels personally responsible for showing a photo that proved to be a fake image. And so he's trying to take some time away from the topic.
Welcome back, everybody. The sDm Files, episode 16. Trickle on in. Fire up your systems. Come find me, x.com/shotdownmine will do the thing. Everybody check out the links down in your breadbasket. We put them all down there, plus some extras as always. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, go do all the things, go do them right now. Here we go.
I fear that if President Trump does not soon show leadership on UAP disclosure, we will never get the truth. I think the national security state that is trying to cover this up is winning the battle right now. Yes, there are good people like Representative Eric Burleson, whom you will be speaking to, who are trying to push for disclosure. And I deeply admire and respect the work that he and others in the UAP caucus are doing in Congress. But the problem is that caucus doesn't have the numbers in the rump of the Republican Party.
Because of that, I am still held by my non-disclosure agreement. But what I can say is what I've been cleared to say by the Pentagon previously, and that is that the U.S. government is in possession of extremely exotic material of unknown origin. And I can also say, after, by the way, a year of a back and forth dialogue with the Pentagon, I can also say now, without getting into trouble, that biologics or biological specimens and samples were recovered from some of the crashes involving some of this very, very exotic technology.
Vetted. Ross Coulthart drops new UFO bombshell. We also got Lue Elizondo reveals new UFO details in wild new interview. And so if you don't know, Vetted will put out at least one video a day, usually kind of covering like one kind of topic. Not super detailed, not super closely, but here's a few clips and he gives his opinion on it. I really like watching Vetted videos. He's definitely in the go along to get along kind of category, so he covers everyone, covers everything, never really says much that is in any way negative, that is a criticism. He says some things like at the end of the Lue Elizondo review of his interview on Dr. Phil, Lue Elizondo reveals new UFO details in wild new interview. At the end there, he says, I don't get how Lue Elizondo is allowed to say the things that he's allowed to say and not allowed to say the things that he's not allowed to say. How any of the things that he's allowed to say are allowed and not classified. And he kind of says that, not just about Lue Elizondo. He'll say that same kind of thing about any of these guys on the inside that used to be on the inside, now are like telling us things, but they still can't tell you much because that's not allowed to be said or classified. Still classified. So, he kind of plays like, the regular dude trying to figure stuff out, taking it in from all the different places. All the episodes this week were bangers, basically, where he's kind of putting it together and letting it rip. You can go watch any of these things if you wanted to yourself. This is 4-hour live stream. I don't even know can we read this stuff in here. Japan's bipartisan UFO Parliamentary League, chaired by former Defense Minister Yakasukuza Hamada. Alright, so I don't really know what that means. I saw people sharing this on X, and it kind of seems to have the trappings of a game show, but maybe it's a actual congressional hearing. And if it's not an actual congressional hearing, it's like one of those fake kind of Richard Dolan congressional hearings, so to speak. But it's going on in Japan, so I don't know. Maybe they do everything in Japan in like game show kind of like style. Even this little pillow creature at some point seemed to have like a role. Look, I don't know what's going on here. So I didn't watch it. It was 4 hours long. I just realized when I was pulling clips here that this is where all of the Eric Burleson clips that were on the internet, that were on X all week long, kind of damning Lue Elizondo, sort of, because he's so sad about the pictures that he shared at the UAP congressional hearing that he's taking a break. That they came from this hearing. What are they calling it? Chaired. It's so weird. It's so weird. The game show style is so weird, but anyways, I listen to Melon. Melon says kind of the same old Melon stuff, that like what he thinks there should be is a lot more transparency, and transparency is good for lots of reasons. You got the real like banger comments were from Ross Coulthart, and that's what I was kind of saying earlier, that he's explaining more, he's sharing more, he's alleviating more. And in this one, this is one of the best ones, because he's like talking slowly so that the translator can translate his Australian to Japanese better, or something. He's doing something like that. And so his Australian, even when he says rump, the rump of the Republican Party, I'm sure that translates into something amazing in Japanese. So, anyways, Ross Coulthart is kind of explaining his position that, firstly, the Trump administration, now that it's in power, is corrupted and is not going to do anything. And if they don't do anything, which he doesn't expect them to do, that's going to make the conspiracy and the cover-up last for at least a couple more decades. And, what do you say to that? But that he doesn't think that that's how it should work. He doesn't agree with that. He thinks that, that level of corruption is really bad for the American people and the people of the world. And that's where we have VETTED jumping in to say, well, Ross Coulthart was saying something kind of a little bit differently back then. He was saying Trump administration knows, Trump administration is going to do something when it comes into power. The reason he's not right now is because he's not in power and he's afraid of getting killed. And if you've been watching Ross Coulthart really closely, you'll notice that he's been getting more and more kind of like fed up with the Trump administration for not, doing disclosure. And I don't like watching Don Jr. here, so you can see kind of most of what he's saying on Don Jr. in this part of the clip also, which is, he thinks it's a shame that the first contact of the humans of our civilization had with these new aliens, NHIs, is that we shot them down with nukes and picked up the survivors and tortured and interrogated them. That's That's a terrible way of going about first contact, and we should all be ashamed. And that's really bad for Americans, our American democracy, our American culture and civilization, and the rest of the planet. He doesn't really say why. He doesn't say like, well, because the aliens who are really awesome. He does call them benevolent aliens at some point. He says mostly benevolent. He doesn't say it, but it's because they're way better than us, and they're gonna come squish us in response to us fucking with them. So that's why it's bad, I guess. And he says at some point, is that really what you want your legacy of first contact to be, you Americans? That you use your nukes to shoot down the aliens? And I was like, yeah, fucking Ross, that is. Yeah. Why don't you guys come out and tell us that? Come out and tell us that you've been shooting down the aliens for 70 years. And then, we'll go from there. Like, it's cool. We get it. It's not really ontological shock that there is aliens, that we shot some of them down. So I like Vetted. I like this week how we kind of strung this all together. We have to go to Lue Elizondo now, talking to Dr. Phil with Bruce Zabel. About half of his interview with Dr. Phil is intro. I don't know. Maybe Dr. Phil has never really covered ufology topic ever before, as far as like putting it on a show. So of this hour, a good half of it is kind of just like ufology history. Lou's history, Zabel's history, kind of the drippings of Roswell and the Majestic 5 and the cover-up and etc. Project Blue Book, and so on. A little sprinkling of the newer stuff with Lue Elizondo and Christopher Mellon, New York Times, and Commander Fravor and the Tic Tac and Grush. I don't think I heard them mention Matthew Brown. I think this was happening right before Matthew Brown. I don't know what I watched. I think I watched Bruce Zabel on his own X account, kind of explaining that this interview was conducted before the UFO hearings, which would have really kind of technically been before Immaculate Constellation was happening. Also, the Immaculate Constellation interviews airing with Matthew Brown. So this podcast, Dr. Phil podcast, even though it came out after all of those kind of ufology events, was filmed before all those ufology events. So none of those things are really addressed in here by Elizondo or Dr. Phil or Zabel. And so in the last half an hour, what they get and what the bombshells were on X and highlighted here with Vetted is that Lue Elizondo says, well, look, I still got my security clearances, and actually they've been updated recently so that I can now tell you some things like, and he says, guess what? It's all true. We have aliens, we have biologics, we have captured aliens that have been recovered at crash retrievals. And that's like a bombshell because Lue Elizondo wasn't saying that before. He would always say, well, I can't talk to you about that for reasons, but I can tell you a parable about finding a 747 in King Tut's tomb. So like that's definitely a change, and that's what Vetted's going on here, and that's kind of the face that he's making here before he goes on to this other topic. Is he's saying, I don't understand, I just don't get why Lue Elizondo could talk about this and not talk about that, or that even if he says he's not to talk about this, that this isn't classified stuff. Like, of course you couldn't be talking about this. It doesn't add up, is what he says. And he says it in like a really nice way, like the nicest way that you'll find someone on YouTube or X saying it, probably. So these are, the whole week was good. You should definitely be watching Vetted. They're short, so you're gonna get at most like 2 topics in like a 10-15 minute kind of time period, and a little bit of his opinions on it. But then you can go watch the whole things down here. It's an hour-long video with Dr. Phil. It's kind of a basic ufology kind of primer if you're a Dr. Phil fan, I guess, and you weren't into ufology. There's not much going on here as far as Zabel or Elizondo goes, except for that little bit where he says, yeah, I can tell you that there's biologics and aliens, which all the other whistleblowers have been saying, except for Lue, who's been still kind of giving you these interesting parables that he'll throw out instead of telling you the ufology side of the coin parable of yeah, there's biologics that were recovered, stop. So good stuff. Vetted. Thanks a lot. That and one of the reasons I wanted to highlight Vetted is because I was kind of taking a break from Elizondo. And people talking about Elizondo, so I wasn't really watching the Elizondo stuff or the coverage of the people who were talking about Elizondo very closely. I wasn't clicking on it. You know, they were showing up in the playlist and stuff. Kind of scrolling through X, and I'd watch the clip or the highlight or whatever, but I wasn't really watching these interviews, and I definitely never had any interest in really watching the 4-hour Japanese parliamentary thing. And so then when I watched it and saw the clips that he pulled out, you know, I appreciated his coverage, and I definitely watched a lot more of the Japanese game show parliamentary thing, and then also the Dr. Phil interview, which I probably wasn't even going to watch, even though I saw Isabel talking about it on X. So basically, because Vetted covered those things, I went and paid attention to them when I wasn't planning on it, and they weren't what I thought they were. You know, they weren't just 4 hours of apologizing for Lue Elizondo. You know what I mean? So definitely appreciate Vetted, appreciate your coverage, appreciate your links. Everyone go check them out, and if there's ever anything that piques your interest, the links are down in your breadbasket for sure.